All right, so welcome back. We are going to crunch out Rahu in Aries. We're reading from Astrology for the Soul by Jan Spiller. We are on page 24, a loving spirit. We're talking about Aries, if you have your North Node in Aries, or if you just want to understand what this means in simple terms. And I hope you understand, if you have a North Node placement in Aries, the South Node of the Moon would be in Libra. Okay. I'll also be in my next videos with this book, and just in the rest of this video period, I'll be saying Rahu instead of the North Node because it's easier, and Ketu to say the South Node of the Moon if I need to. If you haven't seen my previous video, I suggest you watch that. So let's get started. So we left off with a loving spirit. So Aries, Rahu people have a tremendous amount of love, and I have this placement. We have a tremendous amount of love stored up from past lives. We know about relationships, and we've received much appreciation and love in return for the help we have given others. Thus, we came into this incarnation feeling loved by others, and all that love shines through us and is passed on to almost everyone we meet. They have an ability to see not just the rough edges in other people, but the loving qualities too. They perceive who others really are, and then they celebrate that truth. In that state, they feel totally high because they are fully appreciating and celebrating the glory, strength, energy, light, and life in the other person, and it makes them feel incredibly loving. Their challenge in this life is to begin to see the same beauty in themselves. Although these folks are open and loving, if others violate their space, they become angry. Then when their not so loving part begins to emerge, they feel guilty, yet this dark side is part of the human experience. So they're discovering themselves and learning to integrate both sides of their energy, and their loving energy becomes the backdrop for the personality and mood changes that happen to all of us, and their challenge is to remain centered in themselves. So Aries Rahu people, their motive of wanting to give is correct, but if they are trying to give when they feel drained, at best they are only creating a superficial harmony. Every time they become too outwardly focused, appreciating others and not valuing themselves, the demons would then emerge to bring them back in touch with themselves. They don't want to be with people when their dark side is showing. It doesn't reflect the supportive, loving person they feel they should be, so they tend to feel guilty and go off by themselves. Actually, when the dark within them arises, it's a good sign. It is the neglected part of themselves demanding attention. When they turn within and begin consciously loving themselves, noticing their own beauty and taking care of themselves, the demons melt away. Thus, Aries Rahu people need to regularly take time to focus on themselves and see what they need to do to support themselves. And then they will be able to interact with others from a place of internal strength and harmony. Okay, so hypersensitivity, harmony versus harmony versus self-sacrifice. What does that mean? So, essentially, having spent many past incarnations being the support system for others, Aries Rahu people develop a constant openness to others' identities. They intentionally remained aware of the other person, and they could sense the slightest unhappiness or disharmony in that person's mood. And when they focus on keeping the partner's mood happy, they shared in that mood and remained happy themselves. But although this worked well in past lives, in this incarnation, another person's happiness is not enough to evoke true happiness in these folks. They don't have enough personal identity left in their battery to hold the charge from the other person to be deeply happy in this lifetime. They must focus on developing their own identity and recharging their own battery. These folks tend to pacify others, saying whatever is necessary to keep the peace. And when they do this, they think that being nice and serving others, but it's only a temporary solution. postpones a more permanent resolution that would promote a solid relationship based on the identity and integrity of both individuals. So Aries Rahu people are so sensitive to the atmosphere surrounding others that they tend to make maintaining a harmonious atmosphere their focus in relationships. They do need harmony in their lives to feel content and happy, or they get into trouble when they allow their personal sense of balance to depend on another person. Then they feel they must manipulate the other person into staying harmonious with them. If you're happy, I'm happy. They think that if they balance the other person by filling in where he or she lacks strength, that person should happily reciprocate. They can't understand when others don't do their part to keep the harmony going. And they often feel as though they're the only ones doing their fair share. Maintaining harmony in the relationship can become a full-time job for them. Okay? But it's not set up to work that way in this lifetime. In fact, this habit can enslave both partners. The other person loses autonomy and becomes dependent on Aries Rahu people to produce harmony, and Aries Rahu people become bound to the role of providing the harmony, regardless of the personal costs. Sadly, because of this, relationships can become burdensome for these folks. And what does work for them is to pay attention to their relationship with themselves. What activities promote their own feelings of inner harmony? If their balance is off, what should they give to themselves in order to regain their inner harmony? These folks want to be Mr. or Mrs. Nice, and nice people don't upset other people. And this peace at any price syndrome may lead to self-negation, which is a form of dishonesty. Their motive is one of love, but love without honesty leads to resentment. Aries Rahu people have spent so many incarnations helping others obtain their desires that they often equate supporting others with doing what the other person wants. So they sacrifice what they need to be happy in order to fill the other person's needs. In this incarnation, they are learning to reevaluate what support actually is. It is not supportive to give more than one has to give. These natives love the energy of giving to others, but if they get beyond the point of feeling comfortable, they are not really supporting the other person. If they continue to call in their inner reserves of energy, they wear out their battery and nobody wins. These folks must trust themselves. When they feel an inner resistance to giving, it is a signal to pull back and again taking care of themselves. So it does not work for them to be unaware of their separate identity when they feed energy to the force field of the relationship rather than to the other person as a separate entity. They create only temporary harmony at best. This is because they are feeding energy into something that's not really there. A relationship doesn't exist. In physical reality, it's an energy connection between two people, and the energy constantly fluctuates as the two people have different experiences and changing moods. When the relationship is harmonious, it is a result of both partners being strong and peaceful within themselves. So Aries Rahu people lose when they try to constantly prop the other person up through manipulating the energy in the relationship. However, when they encourage independence and individuality in the relationship, dealing directly with the other person and supporting him or her and being strong and separate, they win because the other person will get back in the same way, supporting Aries Rahu people's independence and individuality. Participating versus hiding. So Aries Rahu people have such a history of being the support person that they are instinctively open to others' moods, but in this incarnation it's a habit that they can find extremely draining because they may appear to have a boundary between themselves and the other person, but it's a very thin line. In actuality, they are merged with the other person's energy field in a very codependent way. Sometimes recognizing that they end up feeling drained, these folks avoid participation. They seem to be involved, but on an energy level, remain inside themselves. They're still saying hello and being polite, but they're really not connected with the energy. However, when they remain totally outside the dynamics of the interaction, afterwards they end up on the other extreme and become overly excited, bouncing off the walls with excess energy. For these folks, being drained and being overly excited are two sides of the same coin, not dealing with what's actually happening in the moment. They have either given too much of themselves and feel drained, or given too little and absorb others' energy so that they feel overcharged. Both reactions are a byproduct of not being present or grounded in their bodies, responding to the situation moment by moment as a separate person. The balance lies in being consciously aware of others' energy without being consumed by it. So Aries Rahu people need to stay connected to their own power and be in touch with what they can comfortably contribute. The idea is to share their talents freely, to be of service, and to give from the heart without trying to be more or less than they actually are. So Aries Rahu people often try to work within the dynamic of the merged energy field, theirs and the other person's. They plug into the other's energy and add whatever ingredient is needed to keep things harmonious and they feel good about doing this. It's an expression of their love. But another motive may be that they want to blend their energy with others to avoid standing out as an individual. Then they can participate in the flow of things without being noticed. They have a fear of being acknowledged, which is in fact the fear of acknowledging themselves. Because they're so sensitive and vulnerable, they fear that being acknowledged could be overwhelming. There would be joy in having their positive aspects reflected back to them, but they fear having the negative reflected back as well. So they don't want to face their demons as a result of another's feedback. Maybe they won't be liked. Maybe the other person, in order to protect himself from dealing with his own demons, will lash out at them. They have a lot of concerns about the possible repercussions of being themselves, so they would rather just go along and not really be seen as an individual. However, concerns about how others will see them are a factor only when Aries Rahu people seek to see themselves through others' eyes. So in past lives, it was a positive thing to see themselves through their partner's eyes, as it showed them how to adjust their behavior to more effectively support the other person. However, through many lifetimes of overuse, their habit of fitting in has extinguished their own identity. In this incarnation, it isn't to their advantage to see themselves through others' eyes, as this inhibits their ability to build their own sense of self. So, indecision, vacillation. When these folks make up their mind to go in a given direction, it's sometimes difficult for them to move in a straight line because part of them may question whether or not it's what they really want, and they consider all the other factors that might be involved. It may take them a long time to decide which direction they want to take. The process goes something like this. They make a decision and tell all their friends about it, and then they have the doubts. For example, they may decide, I want to write adventure novels, and they start thinking, I also like other kind of books. They try to embrace one idea and are able to feel like this is really right. Somewhere down the line, they're like, no, I don't feel quite right about it, and then they are back in indecision. So when Aries Rahu people do make a decision, they have no problem justifying it. They can find ways to make any decision right or wrong. However, this mechanism can actually deflect them from the true knowledge of where they stand. For example, when a decision arises, they have an instinctive response, but then they think, well, I want to be fair about this, so I'll look at it from the opposite point of view. This causes them to become confused and lose sight of what they want. So in this lifetime, Aries Rahu people are developing single-mindedness rather than weighing everything before making a choice. They are learning the value of following their initial impulse just to see where it goes. It's time for them to make a decision based on their spontaneous sense of inner excitement and then put the full force of their intellect into implementing it. It's an experiment. Later on, if they lose a feeling of rightness about it and something else excites them, then they can responsibly tie up the loose ends and go on to the next thing. This is a lifetime of new beginnings for them, so it's natural that many decisions they make will be subject to change. And actually, this incarnation is not set up to be one of decision making, which usually implies considering 2 points of view and then finding a compromise. Rather than be the referee in this lifetime, these natives are supposed to be one of the points of view. That is why it is in their best interest to form the habits of noticing their first impulses, which will guide them to correct decisions, and the vitality, confidence, and joy will come back into their lives and will be a blessing for everyone. A major obstacle to this single-mindedness for Aries Rahu people is that they can appreciate the beauty in all their choices owing to past incarnations of being deeply involved with others' lives. They are accustomed to appreciating the beauty in everything outside of themselves. They are in touch with having favorites of anything because they don't know what their own tastes and preferences are. They have a tough time picking out one thing and saying this is it. What they can do is make time to visualize different things inside themselves and learn to feel what the preferences are. So for example, if asked what their favorite color is, they may waver, but if they go off by themselves, visualize the colors inside them and tune in to how they resonate with each one, they will discover their preference. When these folks have to make a decision, they often feel what the right choice is, but sometimes they are forced to decide before they've gotten in touch with that intuitive impulse. So again, visualization can help. They can take a few minutes to visualize themselves following one option, see how they feel about it in their physical body. Then they can visualize following the other option and see how they feel about that. If it's an important matter and they don't have an immediate impulsive response, it's fine to take as much time as they need to visualize so they can make the right choice. Risking others' judgment. If Aries Rahu people allow others to be part of their decision-making process, they lose touch with themselves and are dissatisfied no matter how the situation turns out. So in past lives, their decisions involved a team. They had to consult the other person so the outcome would work for the partnership. But in this lifetime, they want to develop their own identity, so it's better to ask themselves, how do I feel about this decision? When they tell another person their decisions, they become vulnerable to that person's approval. And since they're sensitive, they're very sensitive. If the other person doesn't agree, then they start thinking, maybe I didn't make the right decision. So it's better for them to keep decisions to themselves, knowing that their decision will change as they themselves change and grow. Because Aries Rahu people are influenced by what they think other people think especially if it's someone they respect. They have a tendency to trust others' judgment above their own instincts, but in this lifetime they are learning to take a stand for their own judgment, which is less to do with being right than with discovering more about themselves. These folks fear others will judge them harshly if they make a decision that isn't based on sound logic. They see others making decisions based on logic, so if they make an impulsive decision, they think it isn't as valid. However, for them it's correct to follow impulse, whereas a member of another nodal group may be better off following logic. For Aries Rahu people, decisions based on their first impulse generally work out best, and they use logic to find the best way to implement the decisions. So, if Aries Rahu people are facing a decision and no initial impulse arises within them, it's okay not to make a decision, because it may be a sign that it's not the time for them to make a decision, or that they really don't have a preference. Then it's fine to just say, I don't know. These natives always feel more comfortable responding to a situation when another point of view has already been put on the table. Then they can either agree or disagree with that opinion. It's scary for them to offer their opinion first, but it's their specialty in this incarnation to offer innovative ideas seemingly out of nowhere. Aries Rahu people are great at supporting another's decision, but in this lifetime they need to impulsively feel where they want to go, put their idea on the table, and support it 100%. In this lifetime they are the trailblazers. Needs a sense of identity, owing to so many incarnations in which they sacrifice their own identity for the sake of supporting others. Aries Rahu people enter this lifetime without an inborn sense of identity. Rediscovering and reestablishing a true sense of self is now a primary need, especially in the early years. Their entire sense of self is based on how others see them. So that is, I have this placement. I literally medically transitioned for 7 months because I was dating somebody that was a year older than me, that identified as a woman, and I was on my phone and I thought it was normal. And so I gave myself a lot of issues with that. But anyways, so they may go along with others' definition of who they are or resist it completely. Regardless, it is not their identity. It's a reaction to others' construct of who they are. To begin the path to self-discovery, they need to ask themselves, who am I apart from others' projections? They will find an answer only by looking inside themselves. Self-awareness. To answer their need for self-awareness, it would be helpful for these folks to begin checking in with themselves on a regular basis. When they're not in touch with themselves, they often end up acting in extremes. With others, they feel they have to be a light bearer, loving, supportive, and self-sacrificing all the time. So this represses the part of themselves that cannot possibly be that way all the time, which creates an intense polarity. They're trying to always be loving and supportive because that's the role they played in past lives, but the extremity of this positive role will also evoke the depths of darkness. If they take a closer look at the darkness, they'll see that it's really just their more assertive side, which they haven't allowed themselves to express. It's part of their yang nature. Their masculine side is polarized because it has been suppressed over so many past lives that it's not integrated with the rest of the personality, so it may come out in a very intense way, which causes these Rahu placements in Aries to become embarrassed and think, where did that come from? So the best resolution is to stay congruent with themselves, stay inside their own energy field, and stay in touch with what's going on within them. Then when they are upset, just spontaneously communicate, gosh, for some reason I feel upset about this. Their job is to simply be themselves. When they first experiment with this, they may feel uncomfortable, but they need to trust that since their underlying motive is love, whatever comes out is going to be fundamentally correct. Aries Rahu people are learning to take charge, do what they need to do for themselves, and become self-sufficient by following their desires. When they feel an impulse to do something that they know would bring them a sense of satisfaction, they need to follow through with it. Owing to the self-purification accomplished in past lives, they can trust that their impulses are not harmful to others and in fact signal the direction in which they need to go. In every area of life, the idea is to operate freely on the first impulse of what actually best in any situation. Any resistance from the ego should be disregarded. In this way, they maintain a balance with others that is based on authenticity and taking responsibility for themselves. Since these folks are not innately aware of the value of self-sufficiency, they don't realize how much others value it. They may evoke a negative response when they start supporting someone who hasn't asked for the help. They enter the other person's force field and find out what he or she is feeling and thinking. It's fine for them to be aware of others' needs, but they are learning that others have boundaries and that they themselves have boundaries as well. As they learn to respect others' self-sufficiency, they begin to value self-sufficiency for themselves. So Aries Rahu people tend to be reactionary when they see other people taking care of themselves. They become judgmental and think that others are self-involved, uncaring, and selfish. I have struggled with these feelings before. Yet becoming involved with themselves is the very thing these folks need to do. It bothers them when they see it in others because they're not doing it themselves. When they notice selfishness in others, they could use it as a reminder to check in with their own needs. They must begin giving attention to themselves, even if at first they go a bit to extremes. They may begin by allotting 30 to 40 minutes of solitude for themselves every day, no matter what, in a room by themselves with no interference from the outside world. They might have a cup of tea and plan their day, write in their journal, read an inspired book, or just sit and reflect. The point is, it's their time. During that time, they come first. If they arrange that one thing for themselves, they'll be able to give to others all day long without becoming resentful. So paying conscious attention to their breathing also helps to keep them in touch with their bodies. When they are with others, they can consciously take a deep breath from time to time to keep themselves inside their own boundaries. Some nodal groups are here to learn about selflessness, but Aries Rahu people already know about selflessness. In this lifetime, they need to learn about selfishness. When they stay in touch with themselves, it works for everyone. It's not logical, but it's practical. When they're being themselves, they're afraid that they might hurt others, whereas being themselves actually helps others on a deeper level than they could have anticipated. But Aries Rahu people have to experiment with being selfish, and that is acting on an idea solely because it gives them a sense of satisfaction and see how it works out. And it's time for them to be responsible for creating their own happiness. Gaining recognition from past lives, Aries Rahu people are accustomed to helping others, supporting others' ideas, and carrying others' projects through to completion, so they understand completion energy. However, in this incarnation, their job is to start things. They need to initiate and then let others carry on. So if others don't come along to help, then it's fine for them to take sole responsibility. But if others do show up, their job is to allow others to support them and complete things for them so they can get the ball rolling on the next idea. Sometimes these folks don't want to give their project to others because they fear someone else will get the recognition. They think that if someone else can do it, they're less valuable. They also worry that others will take over and leave them behind. They ask themselves, what do I do then? What is my job? Where's my importance? Excuse me. So these reactions are an outgrowth of painful misunderstandings that arise when Aries Rahu people coming their identity with others. To restore their equilibrium, they need to separate themselves so they can clearly see the role they are playing and the roles other people are playing. Then they can feel their worth in discovering the seed idea and let other people bring the idea to fruition. Sometimes their desire for taking credit and gaining recognition becomes so strong that they repel the creative energy of others who might have made the idea better and more profitable. If Aries Rahu people brain fart. If Aries Rahu and Aries people, they have ideas and it's truly potent, other people will be drawn to support it and each will bring his or her own special talents. But if Aries Rahu people want their own ideas to become reality, they must acknowledge the individual talents of the people they have attracted. By recognizing others' special talents, they can learn to validate others without diminishing themselves. Okay? So occasionally, Aries Rahu people become so preoccupied with getting the credit that they try to diminish the importance of others' contributions. They want all the credit. Of course, if they want all the credit, they have to take all the responsibility and do all the work. So a lot of their ideas never bear fruit. They need to realize that the most important thing is that their original idea gets recognition, that the seed idea is actualized and spread to the widest possible audience. For that to happen, they need to step out of the way and allow others to help them. So this is a role reversal for Aries Rahu people. They are the leaders, but must also allow others to support them and promote their ideas. Since it's their destiny to develop a sense of identity in this lifetime, in a way their desire for recognition is an attempt to establish a sense of self. However, motive determines the result. If their motive is satisfaction and self-discovery is correct, and they will win. If their motive is to win recognition from others, then they're still hooked on needing feedback for their sense of self-worth. They need to release the idea that others must recognize them in order for them to recognize themselves and begin directly giving themselves credit. The irony is that when they let go of control and begin recognizing the special talents of those who are helping them, others will be inspired to contribute more, and the entire project will be permeated with love, and no one else can do their job. They are discovering the seed ideas for everyone else to build on. Grounding. Aries Rahu people need a grounded, structured existence to enable them to share the message of love with the world. The key is in releasing preconceived images of the ways in which love can be expressed. If they limit the way they express themselves to fit their ideas of love, harmonious, gentle, sensitive, caring, giving, compassionate, etc., they're going to miss the boat, because love extends beyond the boundaries of any definitions. If a child is crossing the street in the path of an oncoming car, love may involve grabbing the child's arm and roughly jerking him out of the way. So these folks already know that love is the only reality and all else is illusion. Thus, they are learning to trust that their impulses will be the correct expression of love in any situation. When these natives follow the feelings of love and appreciation within themselves, they are being themselves. However, they need to be grounded with the energy so that it's a solid place for them rather than a state of being. that allows them to be pushed around by others. Aries Rahu people have a need to experience this love with others, and their challenge is to maintain the integrity of their own inner being. The irony is that being just the way they are will teach others and evoke feelings of love. To do this, these folks must give up trying to manipulate the other person's view of them and focus instead on being themselves with as much authenticity and integrity as possible in each moment. It seems hard at first, and it takes discipline and gently reminding themselves to practice their new focus, but ultimately they can only come from an honest, selfless place by staying true to themselves. All right, let's go over the routines of a typical Rahu in Aries. One thing that helps these folks stay grounded is to be aware of their bodies, allowing their bodies to be a natural boundary that gives them a sense of self. They have a tendency to get into other people's consciousness and lose a sense of their own center. So it's healthy for them to exercise regularly in order to stay more grounded and experience the feeling of balance and harmony they need. Having a routine is also good for them. It's a way to check in with themselves every day. It can be very mundane, making the bed first thing in the morning, brewing coffee, opening the blinds, following a daily exercise routine, meditating, preparing a healthy breakfast, walking the dog. Their tendency is to make the bed one day, the next day partially make the bed, the third day not make it at all, the fourth day make it maybe. Inconsistency and lack of routine undermine their personal strength, so daily consistency is the routine is important. Additionally, they can have a weekly routine or ritual. Once a week, they go to their place of worship or meet the same group of friends for lunch. This would counter their tendency to feel victimized by the randomness of life. It would give them a sense of structure and discipline emanating from within, rather than floating in and out of other people's energy and consciousness. A routine helps enhance their own identity. However, Aries Rahu people despise routines, and for good reason. In past lives, having a routine will make them less available to support others whenever they were needed. They didn't develop their own routines, their own life, so they could more easily adjust to others' needs. But in this incarnation, it is to their advantage to develop strong routines and allow others to adapt to them. Also, having their own routines keeps them from falling into other people's routines. The discipline this develops is strengthening for them. It evokes the warrior in them, and they feel great about it. Exploring hobbies and talents is also a good way to develop a sense of self. As Aries Rahu people spend time on their own interests apart from their primary relationship, their identity blossoms. They need to develop these talents through consistent application, regularly taking the time to do the things that bring a sense of personal satisfaction. For example, if they have artistic talents, they might enroll in an art class. If their talent is music, they might take lessons. If they love dancing, they might take dance lessons and or go dancing regularly with their partner or friends. So now let's get into self-discipline. So Aries Rahu people and their sense of being grounded involve self-discipline. And everything that will work to their advantage requires discipline. Spending time alone on a daily basis, following a few self-chosen routines to make their life strong, and remembering to appreciate themselves. So one experiment that will help these folks practice self-discipline and checking in with themselves is to become aware of their eating habits. The idea is to not eat unconsciously out of boredom or to cope with feelings, but to notice when their bodies are hungry and then tune into what their bodies would like to eat. They can use visualization in this. They can imagine having a bite of salad and notice how their bodies feel in response. They imagine soup in their mouths or a sandwich or fruit or mashed potatoes. They can tell how their bodies will respond. Aries Rahu people are so sensitive that when they visualize eating a particular food, their bodies will actually tell them whether that food will make them feel good or sluggish or energetic. Then they can eat depending on what they want to experience at the time, but they're so out of touch with themselves that even this process may be challenging at first. They may have to work on it, yet when they do it, it's very satisfying and will strengthen their connection with themselves. Self-discipline is not a punishment, it's a practice. It involves strengthening the take charge muscles and doing things on a habitual basis that promote strength, health, and well-being. These folks can use self-discipline as a tool to uncover their identity. Consciously practicing self-discipline will evoke the warrior within them in a balanced, harmonious way. On a spiritual level, Aries North Node people or Aries Rahu people are discovering who they really are, allowing a new innate and natural identity to emerge. However, sometimes they can use their lack of clear identity to their advantage in breaking troublesome habits. One easy way for these folks to practice self-discipline is through simply reinventing their identity. Since they have no preconceived rigid perception of themselves, by changing their identity in their own minds, they can make healthy changes in their lives. For example, Jan Spiller says she's had a client with this nodal position who wasn't a smoker in his youth, but began smoking heavily 5 years prior to her seeing him. One day he suddenly stopped smoking with no side effects or withdrawal symptoms. He simply remembered himself as a non-smoker. Establishing one center, relationship as center. Aries Rahu people have had so many lifetimes of identifying with others that they have confused their center, their inner sense of self, with that of their partner. They are hypersensitive to the partner's moods because the other person actually rests at their center. Thus, if the partner is unhappy or dissatisfied, Aries Rahu people will feel it. They can spend all their time and energy trying to make their partner happy so that their own sense of well-being and contentment remains undisturbed. The problem is that nobody can take on the responsibility for making another person happy. Best one can do is appease the partner, adding an ingredient that will temporarily change your mood, but the partner must then constantly be appeased in order to stay happy, and it just isn't set up to work that way for Aries Rahu people in this lifetime. Actually, the growth required of them is best achieved by de-emphasizing the idea that relationships are necessary for their survival. They're learning to stand alone and relate to others from a new perspective. However, despite their sensitivity, these folks are often blissfully ignorant about other people, what motivates them, what they are seeking, and what kind of success they'd like to achieve. Sometimes they only see the other person and themselves on the superficial level of having immediate needs and desires that are or are not satisfied. They only see deeply enough into the other person's identity to manipulate into keeping the mood harmonious. That's why people surprise or disappoint Aries Rahu people. They never saw who the other person really was. We call that rose-colored glasses, honestly. So, in many ways, Aries Rahu people are not relating to the other person at all. They're relating to the relationship between themselves and the other person. This doesn't lead to truly helping their partner or themselves to grow. The relationship isn't an entity. It cannot grow unless the two individuals in it grow. Thus, no matter how much time and energy these folks devote to the relationship, it cannot give back to them. So they're better off examining the needs for autonomy and individual creative expression of both partners by encouraging and inspiring the other person to achieve results on his or her own. They free both the partner and themselves to evolve as individuals. Another drawback to Aries Rahu people focusing on the relationship rather than on what the other individual is that they can't really validate their partner's identity. When Aries Rahu people believe in their partner's ability to be self-sufficient, rather than constantly appeasing them, reassuring them, or picking up the slack, they'll begin to notice the other person's strengths and can encourage them to exercise those strengths. So this sets the stage for also seeing themselves on a deeper level, noticing their own strengths and pursuing their own impulses for growth. Fairness and self-assertion. Aries Rahu people are preoccupied with ideals of justice and fairness. When they think something is unjust, they fly off the handle. They want the world and other people to meet their rigid standards. They figure, I'll play fair with others and others should play fair with me. These folks sincerely wish the world were more just, but it's actually in their best interest that it doesn't work that way because their ideas of justice don't work. They're motivated to act directly from their instincts, their identity, as opposed to being nice. For many incarnations, they've been waiting for a time when it's okay to be themselves, and this is it. So in this lifetime, their sense of fairness and justice is not an accurate barometer of whether these folks are on track or whether they have a right to be angry with another person. In fact, whenever they get on their high horse about injustice or fairness, they are off the path. First, their definition of fair has a lot to do with the fact that they sacrifice their needs and desires for others. They constantly violate the boundaries of how much they can give without loss to self. Then, in fairness, they expect others to do the same. These natives are learning to stop violating their own natural limits and to not entice others to go beyond their boundaries. Aries Rahu people become resentful if they think something isn't fair. If they feel resentment, it's a signal to pull back and recharge. It also signals a need to express their emotions. For example, I seem to be feeling resentful, so I'm going to take some time by myself and work it out. Honest expression validates and strengthens their sense of identity. It also gives the other person a chance to become aware of Aries Rahu people's needs and their boundaries. From the other person's response, the native has a clearer idea of who he or she is dealing with. If the other person says, did I say something that offended you? Aries Rahu people have the opportunity to work it out on the spot. They can't expect others to be as sensitive as they are, since others have had different past life experiences, but once they openly express themselves, they can tell from the other's response how much self-assertion will be necessary before the other person hears them and honors their needs. Aries Rahu people are learning to be assertive in a constructive way that promotes fairness through clear self-expression. For example, Jan Spiller says she's had another client with this nodal placement who is in the process of purchasing through rather large monthly payments some real estate from a friend of hers. One day the friend approached her with a need for money for an unexpected problem, and the client immediately gave her the money. The instinctive Aries Rahu desire to help and share. She assumed the other person would either repay it or deduct the amount from her next payment. However, her friend never repaid or acknowledged that money in any way. The client felt hurt and resentful but never brought the matter up. Naturally, she emotionally distanced herself from her one-time friend. So this type of incident seems to occur frequently in Aries Rahu people's lives. As a consequence, they feel let down by others. From a broader point of view, this is life's way of teaching these folks to assert themselves. They need to take responsibility for themselves and their interactions with others. In the example, when the friend approached her, my client could have said, "Sure, I'll just take the amount off my next payment." Or I could take a third off on the next 3 payments, or what will work for you. In this way, she would have satisfied her need to share and taken care of herself in a direct, honest, fair way. So Aries Rahu people truly do love to give. It's their nature, but their motive needs to be love, not creating codependence. Their giving must be pure without an expectation of result. In order for them to be free of disappointment in their relationships, they find they're giving in an imbalanced way. They can openly bargain with their partner so that both people's needs are equitably met. It's when they expect others to reciprocate without letting them know exactly what they expect that they go off track. They need to give their silent expectations a voice. It's their job to be sure things are fair by asserting themselves and letting others know what they expect in return for their giving. If they do this, they will feel happy because they were the ones who ensured that fairness came about. This builds their confidence. Rather than being displeased with others, they will be pleased with themselves. Since they are the ones who know about fairness, they can teach others by openly stating their standards. Then they aren't only giving to the other person, but they're also sharing the knowledge of how to give and take in relationships. So these folks can access the fresh energy that is emerging in this lifetime through honest self-assertion, not by waiting and reacting to the expectations of others, but by getting in touch with and expressing the impulses of their own being. Even though their sensitivity to others is strong, they must continue to build a sense of their own identity. Through practicing self-sufficiency, a new confidence will emerge, empowering them to relate to others in healthy, innovative ways. Let's get into relationships. Dependence. Dependence on harmony with others, especially the marriage partner, is the primary issue for Aries Rahu people in this lifetime. Actually, the problem goes beyond dependence. It may involve total identification with the partner and sometimes with all significant others. So Aries Rahu people often become so identified with their partners that they are overwhelmed by the other person's emotions. When the other person feels distraught, their first reaction is to rush to say whatever is necessary to restore harmony so that they, Aries Rahu people, can feel better. They handle the partner as an extension of themselves, and then they lose patience trying to get the other person to straighten up and be harmonious so that they can feel comfortable with themselves again. But their sense of urgency generally makes things worse. So these folks need to notice that when they try to regain their own inner harmony by manipulating their partner, it doesn't work. What does work when they feel a lack of harmony from their partner is to politely excuse themselves and spend some time alone. Aries Rahu people need to respect others enough to allow them to experience whatever they're feeling and to work through it on their own unless they ask for help. And this is how people reach a deeper level of self-awareness. Additionally, these natives can gain a better understanding of what is happening with their partner when they get a little distance, and this is why it's crucial for them to have their own space surrounded by their own personal possessions. To reinforce their sense of identity, they need a private place to go when they become over-identified with the partner, a place where they can be alone. Boundaries. These folks can never experience inner tranquility as long as they refuse to acknowledge their own boundaries and their partners and allow another person to be their center. For example, another client Jan Spiller had with this nodal placement of Aries Rahu, who came to her hoping to resolve marriage difficulties, had been married for 23 years, had a great deal of money, and his pattern had always been to appease his wife's moods by buying her things. They traveled extensively, anything to keep her happy, because when she was happy, he was happy, but it was all manipulation on his part, so he could remain undisturbed and have a sense of solidity because he had placed her at his center. Over the years, she became increasingly difficult to please, and eventually nothing could satisfy her. She became verbally abusive to other family members as a way of generating a sense of her own substance, and individual personhood. The destructiveness accelerated until the negative energy even made her unhappy. So the client was beside himself. Nothing he could do would keep his partner happy in his own center undisturbed. This is a lesson that Aries Rahu people are learning. Even under ideal conditions, it's impossible to remain peaceful when someone else rests in your center. None of us really knows what can keep another person happy, and we rob them of the challenge of discovering and fulfilling themselves if we take on that responsibility. If Jan Spiller's client had not distracted his wife from her moments of unhappiness so that he could stay calm, she would have had the opportunity to learn to handle her own moods. This might have averted her need to become destructive as a means of finally being in charge of her own inner state of being. So Aries Rahu people are not accustomed to declaring the boundaries of their own identity. Immediately as those boundaries arise within them, they still feel a need to support their partner, even if it goes against their own best interests. So if their partner disagrees with something they want to do, they may say, okay, I won't do it, but decide they're going to do it anyway. By not honestly standing up for themselves, they reinforce the unhealthy dependence within the relationship. Okay? So some of these kinds of problems stem from the tremendous love and compassion that these folks are born with. They've spent so many past lifetimes developing sensitivity that now it isn't unusual for them to feel more compassionate toward another person or situation than their partner does. And sometimes the partner may not want to deal with a certain problem, and the Aries Rahu people says, okay, we won't. In order to avoid disharmony, they start to feel resentful, yet helpless to correct the situation. They need to support others, and that can lead them to go behind the partner's back and lend a helping hand, but then the partner feels a breach of trust, which damages the relationship, and the Aries Rahu person feels unsupported in being who they really are. And the resolution for this problem can come through both parties expanding their idea of a we to become more flexible, sometimes as a team and sometimes as two separate individuals. In the above situation, Aries Rahu people should communicate what they're experiencing, of course, which of course takes a lot of courage. For example, I hear that you feel resistance supporting the situation and I want to put energy into it. I'll do this independently. Or when the recognition of a different preference arises, these folks need to risk saying, I don't feel that way about it. The problem isn't in doing what they feel is correct. The problem is in lying about it. Excuse me. And that's another danger, is becoming a pathological liar and lying about shit that just isn't even important. And I've done it before, unfortunately. But yeah. So let's read Choosing a Partner. And real quick, we go to, let me see, I think we'll do, I think we might get to 50. Hey, girl is sleepy. I'm about to pass out, crash out. So, choosing a partner. And seeking a mate or any other close connection, Aries Rahu people are subconsciously seeking a relationship in which they can lose themselves. They wish to become so submerged in the other person that they are totally safe. It's the old half and half equals one whole theory, but it doesn't work for these people. Rather, they are here to learn that one whole plus one whole equals a healthy team. However, until they become aware, they will attempt to find someone with whom they can identify, and then they pour all their love and support into reinforcing the other person. But when they seek a partner from this position, it never works out. Often they're attracted to people who abuse them or let them down. In fact, just the opposite approach is scheduled to work for these folks. They need to stop focusing on others and concentrate on themselves instead. They begin to focus on being themselves, allowing their own true, unique identity to emerge and going in their own individual direction. The energy will attract the right person, someone who will appreciate and value them. Aries Rahu people are so accustomed to the joys of partnership from past lives that they subconsciously associate being happy with being in a relationship that is mutually, joyfully symbiotic. They came into this lifetime wanting to do everything with their partner all the time. They're basically cheerful people, but an energy drain is taking place beneath the surface of the relationship that is based on feelings of dependence. So Aries Rahu people need that need for attention and to be included as part of the other person's identity. Those are bottomless pit. Subconsciously, these folks believe they cannot survive without the energy of others, so they tend to cultivate a mutual dependence with stronger people around them. They take time and energy away from their own goals to help the partner reach theirs. They give of their own understanding, being more sensitive to others' needs than to their own. In this way, they create a dependence becoming so integral and an integral part of what the other person needs to survive. So then the Aries Rahu people resent their partners for interfering with their independence and blame them when they don't reach their goals. Even though the Aries Rahu people created the unhealthy dependence and they think it's love, indeed, these folks are very loving and cooperative, but a lot of their self-sacrifice is subconscious manipulation. Love never expects anything in return for giving, and resentment is a byproduct of expecting something and not getting it. Aries Rahu people must learn to be honest with themselves and others about how much they are willing to give and what they expect in return. Being part of a team means making sure they are also supported. So I feel like we've gotten pretty far. We got like 15 pages left. So I'm gonna catch up with y'all in the next one after I get some sleep.